In the middle of that fancy dinner, my own son looked at me and said I was an embarrassment, a stubborn old woman who didn't know when to disappear. My heart, I swear, just seized up in my chest. His voice, it was kept so low, almost a whisper, perfectly controlled, so it wouldn't bother the other tables, just for me. But it hit me like a physical blow, a thunderclap in that hushed, elegant room. It was, without a doubt, the deepest wound I'd ever received. I sat there, trying to keep my posture, but my hands, clasped around my water glass, wouldn't stop trembling. A tiny tremor, almost imperceptible, but I felt every shake deep in my bones. I tried to focus, to make them still, but it was no use. Across the gleaming, linen-covered table, his wife, Sarah, watched me. She had this smile, not a warm one, not even polite. It was more of a subtle, knowing smirk masked as pity, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. She gave this tiny, almost imperceptible nod, agreeing with every cruel, cutting word Michael had just uttered. It was like they were a synchronized team, a quiet performance just for me. And it landed. I felt it, every bit of it. They wanted me to feel utterly small, a burden, a pathetic, out of place relic in the sophisticated world of success they had so carefully built around themselves. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of other conversations, it all just faded into a distant hum as their words echoed in my mind. That public humiliation, right there in front of Michael's friends and all his important business associates, it felt utterly planned, like a trap. You know that deep, unsettling feeling in your gut when something isn't quite right? I felt it in every calculating glance exchanged between them, in every perfectly timed pause Michael took as he spoke. They weren't just being thoughtless, they were deliberate. They were testing me, pushing me into a corner, subtly but persistently, to see if I would finally just crumble, to see if I would simply give in and hand over the very last little bit I still had. Their intention, I felt it with a chilling clarity, was to break me, to strip away my dignity, to turn me into a harmless shadow who would simply sign any paper they put in front of me. No questions asked, no resistance. The restaurant itself was quite something. Dimmed lights, soft jazz playing, polished dark wood, expensive artwork on the walls. A place that usually exuded an aura of calm, refined power. But as Michael continued to speak, his voice a low, steady drone of veiled contempt, my eyes drifted. They landed on the very walls of that elegant room. I found myself looking at the intricate patterns of the wallpaper, the play of shadows from the chandeliers, and a strange, quiet thought formed in my mind. I knew this place, not just as a customer, but intimately. I knew its history, its very foundations, better than he, my own son, ever would. There was a secret strength embedded in those walls, a story that only I truly understood, a past that whispered to me, even as their cruel words tried to drown it out. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here they were, ridiculing me, trying to diminish me, in what was, in a very deep and personal sense, the heart of my own quiet power. They were so confident, so assured in their control, completely unaware of the layers of history, of quiet resilience that surrounded us. They often talked about my will, my stubbornness, as if it were some inconvenient trait to be managed. They probably imagined it was just the fading obstinacy of an old woman. But they never, not for a moment, imagined that this very will, this quiet resolve that worried them so much, was about to be the least of their surprises. In that moment, watching them, feeling the cold distance emanating from my son, something shifted inside me. The searing pain, the raw hurt of his words, it started to crystallize. It wasn't fading, it was hardening, turning into a quiet, unwavering resolve. A sense of clarity, sharp and cold, settled over me. No tears, not now, not ever for them. The silence at our table stretched, a heavy, unspoken agreement between Michael and Sarah. The others at the table, their friends, glanced at us, then quickly looked away, caught in the awkwardness. But I saw the polite pity in their eyes, the veiled condescension. I felt the rejection, not just from my son, but from the world they inhabited, a world that seemed to have no place for me. They saw an old woman, perhaps a little confused, definitely out of touch. Someone easily dismissed, easily managed. What they didn't see was the lifetime of quiet strength that had carried me through so much. They didn't see the lessons learned, the battles fought in silence, the resilience forged in the quiet corners of my life. And they absolutely did not see that the very ground beneath their feet, the very elegant setting they believed was theirs, was about to hold a truth they were completely unprepared for. I just sat there, outwardly calm, but inside, a quiet storm was gathering. I just knew, deep down, they had made a terrible mistake, and it was only a matter of time before they realized it. Who was I, really, for them to think such things? For my own son to look at me like that? An embarrassment? A stubborn old woman who didn't know when to disappear. It made me think about who I truly was, beyond their cruel words and their polished disdain. It made me remember Arthur, my beloved husband, and the life we built together. My name is Eleanor, 76 years old now, and I've seen a lot of life, walked through many seasons. I am the widow of Arthur, my wonderful Arthur. He was a decorated military man, a true hero in my eyes, and he taught me so much about strength, about quiet dignity, and about seeing the good in people, even when it was hidden deep. For most of my life, I worked as a nurse at the military hospital. You learn a lot in a place like that, among the brave men and women who serve their country. You learn the value of discipline, of keeping a calm head even in the most chaotic moments. And yes, you learn the power of silence. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful thing you have. It holds your secrets, your pain, and your unwavering resolve all at once. My house, it's not grand like the one Michael and his wife Sarah live in. It's simple, yes, but it's more than just walls and a roof. It's filled with memories, with the echoes of laughter and quiet conversations. There are picture frames everywhere you look, showing Arthur's smiling face, his strong arm around me, in every stage of our life together. And in a sturdy wooden box, tucked away on my dresser, I keep his service medals. They gleam softly, silent, metallic reminders of courage, sacrifice, and a love that never fades. I've always been a woman who saved, who put away every single penny. It's a habit I inherited from my mother, who taught me that a little bit put aside today can save you a world of worry tomorrow. It wasn't about being stingy. No, it's about thinking of the future, about having a solid cushion for whatever unexpected turns life might throw at you. It was about security, about being able to stand on your own 2 feet, no matter what. Before all this sadness began, before that cold, calculating look settled in my son's eyes, my life was truly peaceful. Sundays were my absolute favorite. My son Michael would visit. He'd bring my grandchildren, little bundles of energy and laughter, and the whole house would just feel alive again, filled with warmth. I'd spend the morning baking my famous cornmeal cake, the sweet, comforting smell of vanilla and cornmeal filling every room, a simple joy that always brought smiles. Then we'd all sit around the big kitchen table, the grandchildren playing nearby with their toys, and Michael would tell me about his work stories. He was always ambitious, always striving for something bigger, something more important, something flashier. I felt proud of him, of course, seeing him make his way in the world, building what he called his empire. But even then, deep down, there was a certain apprehension, a tiny, quiet voice in the back of my mind, a mother's instinct, that whispered about the cost of all that relentless ambition. But I always pushed it away. I wanted to believe in the best for my son, always. What Michael didn't know, what no one truly knew outside of Arthur and me, was that we had been very discreet for years. We didn't just save our money, we invested it. Quietly, carefully, over many, many years, without drawing any attention. We bought an old commercial property, nothing fancy, tucked away in an area that everyone said was up and coming. People chuckled. They said it was a risky bet, just a gamble by an old military couple. But Arthur had a good eye, a quiet intuition, and I trusted him implicitly. We fixed it up a little bit at a time, patching and painting, making sure it was solid. Then we rented it out to a young chef. His name was Ethan, a bright young man with fire in his belly and a dream to open his very first restaurant. We saw something special in him, a passion and a drive that reminded us so much of ourselves when we were young, just starting out. And you know what? That restaurant, his dream, it became a roaring success, a real, honest-to-goodness success. The rent from that place, it was a steady stream, a quiet comfort. It supplemented my pension, and it meant I could always help Michael whenever he needed a little extra for a new project, a new business venture. He always came asking, and I always helped, no questions asked. He knew I had a little extra income, a phrase he used dismissively, as if it were pocket change from an old woman. He never bothered to ask for the details, never once showed any real interest in where it came from or how it was managed. To him, it was just money from an old woman who didn't really know how to spend it, money that would just sit there anyway, waiting to be used. What he didn't know, what he and Sarah both utterly underestimated, was that I never lost control of that asset, not for a second. It was mine, my quiet strength, my silent promise, and I intended to keep it that way, for as long as I lived. It was my anchor, my dignity. Life was good then, simple and full of quiet purpose. I had my memories, my routine, my small comforts. I had Michael, my son, and my beautiful grandchildren. I felt secure, anchored by a lifetime of hard work and quiet determination. I believed in the future, even as my hair turned white and my steps grew a little slower. I believed in the love that bound us, the family we had built, the legacy we were creating. But then, as it often does, life took a sharp, unexpected turn, a turn that changed everything. But then, as it often does, life took a sharp, unexpected turn, a turn that changed everything. It all truly started when Michael married Sarah. You remember Sarah, Michael's wife, the one with that calculated smile. But for her, our Sundays were sacred. But after the wedding, those visits with the grandchildren and the cornmeal cake, they started to become rare. Then, little by little, they just stopped. The phone calls, once long and full of his stories, became quick, almost rushed, always with a tone of haste, like I was holding him up from something far more important. Sarah, she had a way of looking at my house, like it was a curiosity, or maybe even a bit of a burden. She'd say things, always with a sweet, pitying voice, that my house was too small. Or she'd wrinkle her nose ever so slightly and mention that old smell. She called it mothballs, though I always prided myself on keeping a fresh home. It was subtle, yes, but it was there, a little sting each time. And those subtle suggestions began ever so gently at first. She'd talk about a more appropriate place for your age, Eleanor, or how convenient those modern care homes were. She painted pictures of places with bright, sterile hallways, places that to me looked utterly lifeless. They were meant for people who had given up, and I hadn't given up on anything. The coldness between us, it became palpable, like a silent, invisible wall building up brick by brick. You could feel it in the air when they did visit, in the way they kept their distance, in the lack of real warmth, in their greetings. It wasn't just a chill, it was an active pushing away. Then, one afternoon, I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear. They were in my kitchen, talking low, thinking I was still in the garden tending to my roses. But I had just come inside to get a glass of water, and I paused just for a moment to listen. Sarah's voice, clear and sharp, cut through the quiet of my home. She was saying it was absurd for a lady my age to have idle assets. Idle assets. That phrase, it felt so cold, so dehumanizing. She insisted they could manage then better for me, that it was for my own good to ease my burden. My heart just tightened in my chest, a cold knot forming. Then Michael spoke, my son, and to my utter surprise and a pain that sliced right through me, he agreed with her. He said I was being stubborn. He said they needed to take action before it was too late. Too late for what? For me to manage my own life? For me to decide my own future? His words, coming from him, they felt like a betrayal, a stab in the back from the one person I thought would always stand by me, my own son, talking about me like I was a problem to be solved, a thing to be managed. I pretended not to hear anything. I took a deep breath, pushing the raw hurt down into a place where it wouldn't show. I walked into the kitchen as if I'd just stepped in from outside, picking up the coffee pot. My hands, I made them steady, I poured the coffee, my movements calm and deliberate, so they wouldn't notice the desperation that was suddenly churning inside me. I served them, smiling faintly, pretending everything was perfectly normal. But from that day on, the pain of their ingratitude, their cold calculation, settled deep in my chest. It was a heavy, aching weight that I carried everywhere. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I couldn't show weakness. Not to them. They saw my simple home, my quiet life, my old-fashioned ways as ignorance. They mistook my silence, my calm demeanor, for submission. They thought I was an easy target, someone who would just roll over. But little did they know, little did they understand. Behind that calm exterior, behind the quiet smile, something was shifting. A quiet fire had been lit. A plan, not yet fully formed, but certainly beginning to take shape, was starting to bloom in the quiet corners of my mind. A plan that would change everything, not just for me, but for them too. And I knew, deep down, it was going to be a surprise they wouldn't soon forget. And I knew, deep down, it was going to be a surprise they wouldn't soon forget. The dinner, that terrible night, it truly felt like the culmination of everything. It was their wedding anniversary. Michael and Sarah's a big, flashy affair, and they invited me. I knew, deep down, it was a trap. Every instinct, every mother's gut feeling screamed at me not to go. But I went anyway. Perhaps it was a last shred of hope, a desperate wish that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong about them. Or maybe I just needed to see for myself, to face it head on. The restaurant was, of course, the city's most talked about place, all gleaming surfaces and hushed conversations. They seated me at a table with their friends, a group of people I didn't know, all dressed in expensive clothes, all radiating an air of polite arrogance. I sat there, trying to make small talk, trying to look comfortable, but I felt utterly out of place, like a fish out of water, gasping for air in a world that wasn't mine. I watched Michael and Sarah at the main table, smiling, laughing, the perfect hosts. Then came the moment. After a few clinking glasses and a toast to their success, Michael stood up. He walked to the center of the room, holding a microphone. He started a speech, his voice smooth and confident, that on the surface seemed like praise. It started with words about honoring elders, about family. For a fleeting second, a tiny spark of hope flickered within me. Maybe he was going to say something kind, something that acknowledged my presence, my life. But then the words took a turn, a sharp, cruel turn. He started to use me, his own mother, as an example, not of strength or wisdom or love. No, he spoke about how cruel time can be, how it changes people. He chuckled, a light, dismissive sound, and said that I, his mother, still hoarded money under my mattress. He said I refused to accept modernity, shaking his head with a show of exasperated affection. The humiliation, it came dressed as a joke, a punchline delivered with a charming smile. My mother, he said, looking at me with that same subtle pity I'd seen so often from Sarah, is an example of frugality. It's a shame she no longer knows what to do with it. Sometimes we need to help those we love free themselves from their own burdens. And then they laughed. All of them. A polite, restrained laugh, yes. But it was cruel. Oh, so cruel. It rippled through the room, washing over me, each ripple a fresh stab. I felt the looks, the glances of pity, of polite mockery, all focused on me. I just sat there, frozen, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, staring straight ahead. No tears fell. Not one. The pain was too deep for tears. It was so raw, so intense, that it didn't burn or sting. It turned to ice. A cold, hard sheet of ice settled over my heart, over my mind, and in that very moment, as their laughter faded, leaving only a hollow echo in my ears, the bond that tied me to my son, the thread of love and trust I had cherished my entire life, snapped. It broke with a quiet, devastating finality. I was no longer his mother. Not really. I was just a piece, a pawn in the game of power and greed that he and his wife were playing. A problem to be managed, an inconvenience to be removed. My simple, quiet life, my long years of saving and sacrifice, my very existence, had become a burden to them, something they wanted to free me from. What they didn't know, what they so utterly, completely failed to grasp, was that the piece they considered so useless, so easily pushed aside, was in fact the owner of the board, the one who truly held all the cards. But I kept that knowledge locked away, deep inside that icy pain. They would learn in time. Oh, they would learn. But I kept that knowledge locked away, deep inside that icy pain. They would learn in time. Oh, they would learn. That night, I didn't cry a single tear. It might sound strange after such a public blow, but the sadness had solidified into something else, something harder. I got home, the quiet of my house, a welcome balm after the clatter and false laughter of the restaurant. The first thing I did was make myself a cup of chamomile tea, just like Arthur used to do for me whenever I was troubled. The warmth of the mug in my hands, the gentle steam. It was a small comfort, a familiar ritual. I settled into my favorite armchair, the one by the window where the morning light always falls, and just sat there for a while, letting the silence wrap around me. Then slowly, deliberately, I opened the old wooden box that sits on my dresser. It's not a fancy box, just a simple, well-worn one that holds my most important memories, the tangible pieces of a life lived. Inside, nestled among Arthur's gleaming service medals and my own little pins from my nursing days, was a leather folder. It was old, worn smooth by time and by my own hands, its edges softened from countless times I'd touched it. I took it out. It was light, but what it held felt incredibly heavy, incredibly powerful. Inside, just as I remembered, were two crucial things: the original deed to the building where that fancy restaurant operated, the one where Michael had just tried to shame me, and a copy of my will. I had updated it just a few months prior, a quiet decision I'd made after the Sunday visits started. It felt like a small, weighty object in my hand. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't called for advice in years. It was Mr. Henderson. He's an old friend of Arthur's, a man of quiet integrity, my trusted lawyer for decades. He's seen me through so much, from the earliest days of Arthur's military career to managing our small affairs after he passed. He answered on the second ring, his voice gruff but kind, recognizing mine instantly. "Henderson," I said, and even I was surprised by how firm my voice was, how utterly steady. There was no tremor, no hint of the raw hurt I'd felt just hours before. "It's time for us to act." There was no anger in my tone, not a trace, just a cutting clarity, sharp and precise like a surgeon's scalpel. I wasn't going to fight them. I wasn't going to scream or lash out or create a scene. That wasn't my way. That wasn't what Arthur taught me. I was going to use a different kind of weapon, one they would never expect from me. Something quiet, something undeniable. I was going to use the documented truth, the unwavering power of the law, and my own quiet dignity. These were things they had clearly forgotten existed, or perhaps never understood at all. I spent the rest of that night awake, not from sadness. No, the tears still didn't come. I was awake from planning. My mind, usually content with the gentle rhythms of daily life, was sharp, calculating, laying out a path. I remembered every sacrifice Arthur and I had made to buy that property, that little commercial building in what everyone thought was a forgotten part of town. I remembered the long hours, the careful saving, the quiet hope. It was more than just an investment. It was a dream of leaving a legacy, a bedrock of security for our son. We wanted to give him a good start, a foundation he could build on without having to struggle as much as we did. But the legacy, I realized with a profound ache in my chest, wasn't just about the money or the property. It was about character. It was about who you become, what you value, how you treat the people who love you. And Michael, my own son, had proven himself unworthy of either. He had trampled on the love, dismissed the sacrifice, and tried to strip away my dignity. The humiliation I suffered at that dinner, the cold, calculated cruelty of it, would be the last. I wouldn't let them do it again. I wouldn't let them take anything else from me. My quiet resolve hardened even further. It was time. It was truly time. My quiet resolve hardened even further. It was time. It was truly time. In the days that followed that terrible dinner, the pressure, it just kept mounting. Like a slow, steady squeeze. Michael and Sarah, they started calling me daily, every single day. But their concern, it felt so thin, so transparent. It was a false concern, a mask they wore. They'd talk in these saccharine voices, saying they were researching the best care homes for me. They'd found what they called a great opportunity. A place, they'd say, with all the amenities. A place where I wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. It was all so carefully rehearsed, so perfectly pitched, designed to sound like they had my best interests at heart. But I knew better. My heart just felt cold. Then, one afternoon, they just appeared at my door, unannounced. Michael was holding a folder, thick with papers. Sarah of course, was right beside him. Her smile stretched, that same subtle, snake-like quality to it. They came in, uninvited in a way, taking over my small living room with their expensive clothes and their overwhelming presence. They sat on my couch, looking perfectly comfortable, while I stood there, watching them. Michael opened the folder and presented me with a stack of documents. A power of attorney. He explained, in his smooth business voice, that it was so they could take care of my finances. He said it would lift such a burden from my shoulders. Sarah nodded eagerly, her eyes shining with what she thought was kindness, but I saw only calculation. "It's for your own good, Eleanor," she chirped, her voice too sweet. "You shouldn't have to worry about these things anymore. Just sign and we'll handle everything." I took the papers. I didn't even look at them closely. I just held them in my hands, feeling the weight of their expectations, the weight of their greed. I looked from Michael to Sarah, then back to Michael, my son, and I saw nothing but a stranger. No, I saw someone I knew, but that person was now consumed by something dark and ugly. I just calmly refused to sign. My voice was steady, a quiet contrast to their forced enthusiasm. "I need to think," I told them. Just that. Simple words. I needed to think. That simple refusal. It was like I had thrown cold water on them. Their faces changed. The false concern vanished, replaced by something much harder, much colder. The refusal infuriated them. I could see it, simmering just beneath their polished exteriors. "Michael," he raised his voice, not shouting, but it was loud enough, sharp enough to cut through the quiet of my home. He said I was being selfish. He said I didn't understand the difficulties they were facing, as if my life, my money, my decisions were somehow responsible for their struggles. He even said that if I didn't cooperate, if I continued to be so stubborn, they would have to take legal action. He said they would have to go to court to prove I was no longer capable of managing my own assets. The threat hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. It was clear. Sign the papers, or they would declare me incompetent. I just listened. I didn't respond. My face, I kept it blank, revealing nothing. But inside, I felt utterly alone. It was a profound, aching loneliness that settled deep in my bones. I looked at Michael, my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had loved and supported, and I saw nothing but greed in his eyes. Just a cold, calculating desire for what I had. And Sarah, his wife, I saw how easily she manipulated him, how she pulled his strings, how he let himself be led. The pain was immense. It wasn't just sadness. It was a feeling of abandonment that cut to the very soul. To be discarded, deemed useless, by your own flesh and blood. It's a wound that doesn't bleed outwardly, but it sears you from the inside. But you know what? Every threat, every harsh word, every calculated move they made, it didn't break me. It only strengthened my resolve. Each barb, each moment of their arrogance, it just fueled a quiet fire within me. They thought they were cornering me, winning. They thought they were digging my grave, but they were wrong, so terribly wrong. They were digging their own, deep and wide, and I merely watched in silence, my mind clear, waiting. tucked away in the back of that very same restaurant where Michael had humiliated me just a week before. The irony wasn't lost on me. It felt like I was bringing them back to the scene of their crime, but this time I was holding the key. They arrived irritated, of course. I could see it in their stiff postures, their tight smiles. They probably thought I had finally cracked, that I was there to sign their papers, to give in to their demands. Their eyes held a flicker of triumph, a smugness that turned my stomach. But when they walked in, their faces froze. I wasn't alone. Beside me, calm and dignified, sat Mr. Henderson, my trusted lawyer, with a worn leather folder placed deliberately on the polished table between us. Their expressions, once so arrogant, quickly morphed into confusion, then alarm. The air in the room, already tense, grew thick with unspoken questions. Michael shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between me, Mr. Henderson, and the folder. Sarah's subtle smile completely vanished. Mr. Henderson began to speak, his voice calm, clear, and utterly imposing. He didn't shout, he didn't accuse. He simply stated, very matter-of-factly, that he was there as my legal representative to discuss the administration of my assets. He looked directly at them, his gaze unwavering. Then he paused. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the leather folder. He took out a document, a single crisp piece of paper, and placed it right there on the table, pushing it gently towards them. It was the deed to the entire building, the one that housed this very restaurant, this elegant, exclusive place where they now sat, staring. My name, Eleanor Vance, was listed clearly, undeniably, as the sole owner. Michael's jaw dropped. It literally sagged open. Sarah, beside him, went utterly pale, like all the blood had drained from her face. Their eyes, wide with disbelief, scanned the document. They were sitting in my restaurant. The place where they felt so powerful, so much in control, was, in fact, my property. My quiet strength, my hidden asset, suddenly stood revealed. The silence in the room was deafening, punctuated only by the distant clinking of silverware from the main dining area, a sound that now seemed to mock their shock. But that wasn't the end. Mr. Henderson wasn't finished. He reached into the folder again, and this time he pulled out another document. It was a copy of my will. As you can see, he said, his voice still calm, Mrs. Vance has updated her wishes quite recently. Sarah, quicker than Michael, practically snatched the paper from his hand. Her eyes darted over the lines, desperate, searching. And then she froze, absolutely still. Her face turned a sickly shade of white. The color drained from her lips. The document, which Mr. Henderson then slowly and clearly read aloud, declared that upon my death, the building they now sat in would be sold, and 100% of its value would be donated, not to Michael, not to their children, but to a charity that supports military families, a charity close to my heart, one that helps the kind of people Arthur and I respected, people who understood sacrifice and honor. And for my son, Michael, my only child, the one who called me an embarrassment and tried to take everything from me, I left him only one thing, a simple framed photo of me with his father, Arthur. It had a dedication written in my own hand right there on the back. So you never forget your origins. The silence that followed was immense, heavy. It pressed down on us all. There were no shouts from them, no angry accusations, no desperate pleas. There was no revenge in my heart, no triumph in my eyes, just the truth. Cold, undeniable, and utterly irrefutable. It was justice, served without a single raised voice, without a tear. I didn't wait for apologies. I didn't wait for them to process it, to speak, to react further. My part was done. I simply stood up from the table, thanked Mr. Henderson with a small, grateful nod, and turned. I walked out of that private room, leaving the two of them there, alone, surrounded by the shattered remains of their greedy plans. Their world, built on what they thought was my weakness, had just collapsed. My quiet life, my small house, my simple existence, they had underestimated everything. And as I stepped into the bustling main part of the restaurant, into the light and noise, I felt a strange lightness. A chapter had closed, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that my story was far from over. I didn't wait for apologies, didn't even glance back. My part was done. I just stood up from that table, a quiet sense of finality settling over me. Thanked Mr. Henderson with a small, grateful nod for his steady presence, and turned. I walked out of that private room, leaving the two of them there, alone, surrounded by the shattered remains of their greedy, calculating plans. Their world, built on what they thought was my weakness, on their assumptions, had just collapsed. My quiet life, my small house, my simple existence. They had underestimated everything. And as I stepped into the bustling main part of the restaurant, into the light and noise, I felt a strange lightness. A chapter had closed, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that my story was far from over. The very next week, I put the building up for sale. It was a quick decision, a clear one. I didn't want the reminder or the ties. The young chef, Ethan, who had rented the space for his restaurant all those years, he came forward with a fair offer. He loved that place, poured his heart into it, and I knew he would continue to cherish it, to make it thrive. I accepted, of course. It made me happy, truly, to know that the place Arthur and I had built, the place that had brought us so much quiet satisfaction, would remain in the hands of someone who valued it, someone with a good heart and a true passion, not someone who saw it as just another asset to exploit. With the money from the sale, I didn't go extravagant. That's not my way. I bought myself a smaller apartment. It's brighter, though, filled with natural light, and it's right near a beautiful park. I can see the trees from my window, watch the seasons change. It feels open, peaceful. And the rest of the money, the substantial rest, I invested, carefully as always, to ensure that I would have a peaceful, secure old age. No more worries, no more needing to rely on anyone. Just quiet independence, earned and cherished. My routine changed completely, but you know what? It changed for the better. For years, I had quietly supported the charity I'd chosen for my inheritance, the one that helped military families. Now, I started doing volunteer work there. A few days a week, I'd go in, help with the paperwork, talk to the families. And there, I met people, other widows, just like me, who had loved and lost, other veterans, carrying their own quiet burdens and triumphs, people with stories of sacrifice and honor, people who understood what true loyalty meant, what genuine community felt like. I found a new family there, you see, a family based on mutual respect, on shared values, not on blood ties that had been corroded by greed and cold ambition. Michael, he never contacted me again after that meeting. Not a call, not a letter, not a single message. And his absence, which once, for so long, had hurt me so deeply, now it brought a strange and profound peace. The aching void he left behind, it slowly filled with the warmth of new connections, with the quiet dignity of my own choices. There was no magical reconciliation, no tearful apology that healed everything with a single word. Life isn't like that, not usually. It's messier, more real. But I rediscovered myself. I found that my true strength wasn't in money or property, or even in my relationship with my son. No, my strength was in my ability to remain whole, to remain true to myself, even when the person I loved most in the world tried so hard to break me, to destroy me. I no longer needed them to be happy. I was enough for myself, more than enough, and in that realization, I found a quiet joy that no one could ever take away. And in that realization, I found a quiet joy that no one could ever take away. It made me think, truly think, about everything that had happened, not just to me, but to so many others like me. Life, you see, it has a way of teaching us lessons, sometimes gentle, sometimes with a harsh, unyielding hand. And the biggest lesson I learned, the one that settled deepest in my heart, is that sometimes the greatest disappointments, the deepest hurts, they come from the very places where we've poured our greatest love. You give your heart, your time, your sacrifices to build something beautiful, a family, a future. You nurture, you support, you believe. And then, one day, the people you've given so much to, the ones you expected would always see your worth, they look at you and see something else. They saw me as a problem to be solved, an old woman with idle assets, a past to be erased, an inconvenience to be managed. They forgot everything, didn't they? They forgot the sleepless nights, the quiet struggles, the small joys, the big dreams Arthur and I had. They forgot that it was this very past, our shared history, that built everything they had, everything they aspired to. The foundation was mine, yet they tried to dismantle the architect. And I wonder, looking at you now, listening to my story, what about you? Have you ever felt that your history and your sacrifices were forgotten by those you helped the most to build? It's a silent pain, isn't it? A wound that doesn't show on the outside, but it aches deep within. It's a feeling of being unseen, unheard, undervalued, especially when you've given so much of yourself. But this pain, as quiet and as deep as it is, it also has a strange power. It transforms us. It forces us to look inward, to remember who we truly are, beyond the roles others assign us, beyond the expectations they place upon us, or the labels they try to stick to us. It makes you remember your own strength, your own quiet resilience that got you through everything else life has thrown your way. I hope that, if one day you ever go through something like this, something that tries to dim your light or diminish your worth, you find within yourself the same steady, unwavering strength I found in my own story. Because our dignity, you see, it's the only inheritance no one, absolutely no one, can ever take from us. Not money, not property, not even the love of a child. That inner sense of self-worth, of knowing who you are and what you stand for, that's yours alone, always. Sometimes, when the ties that bind us become chains that suffocate, it is necessary, truly necessary. It's necessary to step away, to find yourself again, to rediscover the person you are, unburdened by others' expectations or their greed. It's necessary to leave behind those who simply do not know the value of having you around. You don't owe them your peace. You don't owe them your well-being. Self-love, especially as we get older, isn't selfishness, no matter what anyone tries to tell you. It's the final act of survival, a testament to a life lived. It's the certainty that our journey, with all its joys and all its scars, was worth it. Every single step. And that we, each of us, deserve to walk the rest of that journey with peace, respect, and our head held high. That feeling, that quiet strength, it's a gift we give ourselves. A gift of knowing our own worth, independent of anyone else's approval or disapproval. It's what allows us to look back, not with bitterness, but with a deep understanding of the path we've walked, and to look forward with a gentle hope for the days yet to come. I sit by my window now, in my bright new apartment, watching the leaves change in the park. My days are filled with purpose, with the warmth of genuine connections at the charity, with the simple joys of a life lived on my own terms. There's a lightness in my step, a peace in my heart that I hadn't known in a long, long time. It's the peace of knowing I honored my own truth, that I stood firm when tested, and that I found my way back to myself. These kinds of stories, you know, they're not always easy to hear or to tell, but I believe they're important. They remind us we're not alone in our struggles, that courage comes in many forms, often in the quietest moments. They show us that strength isn't just about fighting, but about enduring, about finding peace, and about cherishing who you are. And if you want to keep receiving real stories like this, stay tuned. YouTube might be unsubscribing you without warning. Confirm you are still subscribed to the channel and activate the bell. Because in sharing our journeys, in truly listening to one another, we find the threads that connect us all. We find comfort, inspiration, and the quiet assurance that no matter what, our stories matter. And so do you.